I have the full transcript. Let me write a completely new story applying all the formulas. The names to avoid: Lauren, Richard, Eleanor, Diane, Natalie, Marcus, Vanessa, Simone, Cora, Brenda, Pete, Patricia, Daniel, Priya, Ray, Connor, Gloria, Ren, Tara, Sandra. I stared at the notification for 6 seconds. I counted them. 6 seconds of my brain refusing to process what my eyes were reading, because if it was true, then everything I had built for the last 4 years, every skipped vacation, every packed lunch, every no to myself and yes to the people I loved, was gone. The alert came from my brokerage app. A liquidation event. Full portfolio. $211,000 converted to cash and wired out in a single transfer at 2014 in the morning while I was asleep. I wasn't hacked by a stranger. I knew exactly who did it because I had made one catastrophic mistake 11 months ago. I had given my sister joint access to the account. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed forensic accountant, which means I spend my days building the financial cases that put fraudsters in front of federal judges. I reconstruct money trails for a living. I find the lie buried inside the numbers. I testify under oath about the mechanics of financial crime, and my older sister, Jade, used that same account to wire $211,000 out of my life at 2 in the morning. Before I tell you how a forensic accountant hunts her own sister, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know whose side you're on before this story gets ugly. You're probably asking the same thing the investigator asked me later, with a completely straight face, her pen hovering above the notepad. Why did a forensic accountant give joint account access to anyone? It sounds absurd. I know it does. I have asked myself that question approximately 400 times since that night. But financial abuse doesn't begin with a crime. It begins with a story. And the story in my family was one I had been hearing since I was 17 years old. The story went like this. Claire got out. Jade stayed. When I left our hometown in rural Ohio for a finance program in Columbus, my mother called it abandonment dressed up as ambition. Jade stayed home, worked part-time at a grocery store, and became the daughter who was present, who drove mom to her appointments, who showed up for the holidays I couldn't always make, who carried the weight that I had supposedly shed the moment I crossed the county line with a scholarship and a backpack. For years, that story was the tax I paid on my own success. Money, guilt, access. If I didn't give, I was selfish. If I questioned it, I was cold. The cost of being the one who made it was subsidizing the ones who stayed behind. 4 years ago, my nephew was born. Jade's son, a tiny red-faced boy named Felix. And 6 weeks after he arrived, Jade called me in tears. The baby needed a specialist, an out-of-pocket cost she couldn't cover on her income. Could I help? I wired her $2,000 that same afternoon. Then it was $4,000 for a car repair. Then $1,200 for back rent when her hours got cut. Then a credit card balance that had gotten out of control. I paid it. I told myself I was being a good sister, a good aunt. I told myself she was struggling, and struggling wasn't a character flaw. But each time, the story shifted slightly. The emergencies got bigger. The gratitude got shorter. By the time I was 30, I had sent Jade over $40,000 across transfers, loans she never called loans, expenses I never tracked because tracking felt ungenerous. I didn't give her access to the account because I was naive. I gave it to her because I was exhausted from saying no. It was 11 months ago. Felix had just turned 3, and Jade called saying she needed to pay a deposit on a preschool program. The one she wanted had a waiting list, but a slot had just opened. She needed to move fast. A few $100s. She didn't have her debit card on her. Could she pull from mine just this once? I was in the middle of a case review. I had a deposition in 4 hours. I said yes just to end the call. I added her as a joint user. Just for the one transfer, I told myself. I'd remove her after. I forgot. 11 months of forgetting because nothing else unusual happened. No large withdrawals. No suspicious activity. The account hummed along quietly while I built my savings back up. Client by client, case by case, month by month. Until 2014 in the morning, when Jade remembered she had access. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, phone in both hands. The blue light of the transaction log turning my face cold. $211,000. Wired to an account I didn't recognize. A business name in the routing details. Meridian Capital Solutions LLC. Something pulled at the back of my professional brain even through the shock. That name. I had seen that structure before. I didn't call the bank. Not yet. I got up, went to my home office, and opened my work laptop. The forensic dashboard loaded. The same software I used to trace cartel finance and corporate embezzlement lit up the dark room. My hands were steady. That surprised me. My stomach was in free fall, but my hands were completely still, because this was the thing I was trained for. Not for my own money, not for my own sister, but the mechanics were identical. Follow the money, build the map, find the lie. I ran Meridian Capital Solutions through the Federal Business Registry. Registered 8 months ago. Single registered agent. A name I didn't recognize. Registered address in Nevada. A mail forwarding service. The kind that exists specifically to obscure the real location of a business. No website. No verified employees. No operating history. I cross-referenced it against the FinCEN database, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the federal repository where suspicious entities get flagged by banks, investigators, and regulators. Meridian Capital Solutions had 3 prior suspicious activity flags. All 3 involved wire transfers from individual accounts. All 3 were under active monitoring. My sister had wired $211,000 into a federally monitored shell account. I pushed back from the desk and stared at the ceiling for a moment. This wasn't a desperate woman who made a terrible choice. This was premeditated. You don't wire $250,000 into a shell account at 2 in the morning by accident. You plan it. You wait for the right window. You pick the night your forensic accountant's sister goes to bed early because she has an 8 a.m. client call. I went back to the keyboard. I needed intent. In a federal case, the difference between my sister misunderstood her account access and my sister committed wire fraud comes down to evidence of planning. A text. An email. Anything time-stamped before the transfer that showed she knew exactly what she was doing. 3 years ago, when Jade got her first smartphone, I set it up for her. I put her on my family plan so her bill wouldn't be a problem. She was still on it, which meant her cloud backup had been syncing to a shared family storage account the whole time. I opened the family cloud dashboard. Her messages were there. She had deleted the thread, but she hadn't cleared the recently deleted folder. I hit restore. The conversation was with a contact saved as D, no last name. The timestamp started 4 days ago. D, the window is this week. She's got a deposition Thursday. She'll be dead asleep by 10. Jade, how much is in there? D, last we checked, 210, 215. Enough. Jade, and it goes straight to the LLC? D, routing clears in under 6 hours? By the time she notices, it's already moved. Jade, she'll know it was me. D, she won't be able to prove it fast enough. These accounts are layered. By the time forensics catches up, it's been converted twice. Jade, she's a forensic accountant. D, she's your sister. She'll be too emotional to think straight. I read that last line 3 times. She'll be too emotional to think straight. I took a screenshot. That was Exhibit A. I felt something change in my chest right then. Not anger. Not grief. A door closing. The version of me that spent 14 years apologizing for being the one who left, the one who made it, the one who dared to want more. She walked out through that door and didn't look back. They had planned this. They had looked at my professional skills and gambled that love would short-circuit them. They had counted on me being a sister first and an investigator second. They lost that bet the moment I opened my laptop. I kept pulling the thread. The contact D. I ran the phone number through a reverse lookup and a federal contractor database. A name came back. A man Jade had been seeing for about a year, someone she'd mentioned a few times in passing. I had never met him. She'd always kept him at a slight distance when it came to me, which I now understood completely. He had a prior. A wire fraud conviction from 6 years ago, federal, served 18 months, released on supervised probation. His probation had ended 14 months ago. He had waited out his supervised period and then found a new partner, a woman with access to a forensic accountant's portfolio. I added his name to the evidence folder. Then I heard a sound from the hallway. I turned around. My daughter Maya was standing in the doorway. She's 8 years old, and she inherits my inability to sleep deeply when something is wrong. She has this radar for disturbance that I've never been able to explain. She pads out of her room like a small, serious ghost whenever the air in the house changes. She looked at me. She looked at the screen. "Mom," she said. "What happened?" I wanted to send her back to bed. I wanted to tell her it was nothing, a work thing. Nothing to worry about, but Maya has a finely tuned detector for dishonesty, possibly because I've always refused to lie to her. And she was already reading the numbers on the screen with her head tilted. "Did something happen to our money?" she asked. I took a breath. "Yes," I said. Aunt Jade took something that wasn't hers. Maya was quiet for a moment. Her expression didn't collapse the way I expected. She looked the way she looks when she's working through a hard math problem. Focused. Almost clinical. "Is it fixable?" she asked. "Yes," I said. And for the first time since I had seen that notification, I actually believed it. "Then fix it," she said. She pulled a chair up next to me, sat down, folded her hands on the desk. "I'll stay." I looked at my 8-year-old daughter sitting at my desk at 3 in the morning like a small board member, and I started to laugh. Not the hysterical kind. The kind that comes when the absurdity of a situation cracks through the fear and shows you clearly how ridiculous the alternative, falling apart, actually is. "Okay," I said. "Then let's get to work." I didn't call the police. Local law enforcement files a report. They issue a case number. They tell you to contact your financial institution. They do not have the tools or the jurisdiction to chase a wire transfer that's already routing through a shell company with federal flags. But I had tools. In forensic accounting, we work in direct coordination with federal financial crime units. I have a secure reporting portal through my firm with a direct line to FinCEN and, in cases involving flagged shell entities, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I had used it dozens of times on client cases. I had never used it for myself. I opened the portal. I typed in a transaction ID, the routing details, the Meridian Capital Solutions profile, the prior FinCEN flags, the message thread, the prior conviction of the man identified as D. I cross-referenced every piece of evidence I had assembled in the last 2 hours and filed a complete suspicious activity report with an attached case package. At the bottom of the form, there was a field for additional context. I typed, "The account holder is a federal forensic consultant. The receiving entity is a previously flagged shell company. This is a coordinated fraud involving a prior federal wire fraud offender currently using the account holder's family member as a proxy. Time sensitive." I hit submit at 4,047 in the morning. The federal financial system doesn't wait. When a transfer touches a flagged entity and the SAR comes in with a prior conviction link and documented intent, the automated response is immediate. The transfer was frozen before it completed its second routing hop. Meridian Capital Solutions locked every account touching the chain lot, including Jade's personal account, her joint account with her boyfriend, and the personal account of the man saved in her phone as D at 5:22 a.m. My phone rang. It was Jade. I let it ring 4 times. I needed the 4 seconds to put the right voice on. Not the voice I used in depositions. Not the cold professional, the scared, confused sister. I needed her to believe, just long enough that I didn't know what had happened. I answered. "Jade?" I made my voice rough and sleepy. "It's almost 5:30, what?" "What did you do?" It wasn't a question. Her voice was a wire pulled too tight, vibrating at the edge of breaking. "Claire, what did you do?" "What? What's wrong?" "Don't." Her voice cracked. "The account. The transfer. It's frozen. Everything's frozen. Everything's frozen. His accounts, my accounts, all of it." "What did you do?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said softly. "I woke up and my account had been emptied. I thought I was hacked. I was going to call the bank in the morning." "Jade, do you know what happened? Was something wrong with the account?" Silence. I could hear her breathing. I could hear a second voice in the background, male, tense, speaking low and fast. "You need to call the bank," she said. "You need to tell them the transfer was authorized, that you approved it, that it was a mistake. But I didn't approve it. That it was a mistake. But I didn't approve it," I said. "Jade, I don't understand. $200,000 left my account? How do I tell them I approve something I didn't approve?" "Because you authorized me on the account." Her voice had shifted. The panic was hardening into something else. "Calculation. Joint access means I had every right to move that money. You just need to call and confirm it. That's all. Call the bank, tell them it was authorized, and this all goes away. Do it right now, Claire. I let a pause sit. I can't do that, I said quietly. Why not? Because I read your messages, Jade. The silence on the other end was the longest I have ever heard from another human being. I restored the deleted thread, I said. I have the whole conversation. I know who D is. I know about his prior conviction. I know about Meridian Capital Solutions. I filed the SAR 2 hours ago. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has the full case package. She stopped. Started again. You would do that to your own sister. And there it was. That sentence. The same sentence in 100 different forms that had been extracting payment from me for 14 years. You would do that. As if the crime she committed was less real than my response to it. As if protecting myself from fraud was the betrayal. You stole from me? I said. You planned it for days. You let someone with a federal wire fraud conviction talk you into this, and you did it at 2 in the morning while I was asleep because you were counting on me being too emotional to act like a professional. She didn't say anything. I'm not too emotional, I said. I'm a forensic accountant, and you are now a federal wire fraud suspect. I heard her start to cry. Then I heard the second voice in the background rise, sharper now. Put him on, I said. What? Put him on the phone. A shuffle. Then a voice I had never spoken to before. Controlled, with a careful flatness that I recognized as someone trying to manage a situation they have just realized is no longer manageable. Claire, he said. I know your full name. I said. I know your case number from 6 years ago. I know your probation end date. I know about Meridian. The FBI has everything I have, which means they also know that a prior federal wire fraud offender is involved in a new scheme involving a flag shell entity. Do you know what they call that? He didn't answer. Recidivism, I said. The sentencing guidelines on a second federal wire fraud conviction for a prior offender start at 10 years. That's before they add conspiracy. The line disconnected. I set my phone face down on the desk. Maya was watching me. Her eyes were large and very still. Is it done? She asked. The hard part is done, I said. She nodded and reached over and took my hand and held it, and that was the moment I finally cried. Not from grief, from relief. From the specific exhaustion of carrying something for 14 years and finally setting it down. The investigation moved fast after that. Faster than I expected, honestly. When you file in SAR with a prepackaged evidence folder that links a prior federal offender to an active shell company with existing FinCEN flags, the Financial Crimes Unit doesn't treat it like a new case. They treat it like an extension of something they were already watching. Meridian Capital Solutions had been under passive monitoring for 7 months. My SAR gave them the documented human link they needed to escalate. Jade and her boyfriend were brought in for questioning within 48 hours. She had a lawyer by that afternoon. He did not have one initially, which told me he had believed, right up until the moment the investigator walked in, that his financial architecture was solid enough to hold. It wasn't, because he had tried to outsmart a forensic accountant using the forensic accountant's own money. The charges were federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. For him, the prior conviction meant the sentence guidelines were severe. For Jade, first offense, cooperation with investigators, once she understood the exposure. She negotiated. I was not consulted on the negotiation. I didn't ask to be. Whatever she agreed to was between her and the federal prosecutor and whatever conscience she could assemble in a holding room. The money came back, not all at once. Some of it had already moved once through the shell's internal structure before the freeze hit, which meant a recovery process through the Financial Crimes Unit, but I had documented everything precisely enough that there was no dispute about the amount. It took 4 months, but it came back. I got a voicemail from Jade 3 weeks after the charges were filed. She didn't apologize exactly. She said she hoped I understood that she hadn't wanted to hurt me, that things had gotten complicated, that she had been in a bad place. I listened to it once. I didn't call back. People ask if that's cold, if I should have heard her out. If family means you owe someone a conversation even after they've looked you in the eye for decades and decided your success meant your resources were theirs to take, I don't think it's cold. I think it's honest. The sister I grieved was the one I had invented across years of guilt and distance and subsidized loyalty. The real Jade had been making calculations about me since I was 17 years old. Letting go of the imagined one wasn't cruelty. It was just accuracy. Maya asked me once, about 6 months later, if I missed her. We were driving home from her school, and she asked it the way she asks everything, matter of factly, without a lot of scaffolding. I thought about it for a real moment. I miss the version of her I made up, I said. I don't miss the actual person very much. Maya nodded like that was a reasonable answer. Then she asked if we could stop for ice cream. We stopped for ice cream. That money had been sitting in that account for a very specific reason. I had been building toward a down payment on a house, a real one, not the two-bedroom rental with the drafty windows and the upstairs neighbor who apparently rearranges furniture at midnight. Maya had picked out her future bedroom in every house we toured on mine. She had a running notes document on her tablet with columns, good things, bad things, questions to ask. 8 months after the money came back, we closed on a house in a neighborhood with a school she had researched herself. Her bedroom has 3 windows. She pointed them out in a listing with the particular satisfaction of a person whose spreadsheet has finally resolved. The last time I added anyone as a joint account user was the day I opened a custodial investment account for Maya. I told her what joint access meant. I explained the mechanics. I showed her the account balance and the projected growth curve and a decision framework for making changes. She was 8 years old. She took notes. The family tolerance fee. I've been thinking about that phrase since all of this happened. The invisible monthly subscription you pay just to hold your place in a family structure that profits from your guilt. For 14 years, I paid it. Faithfully, automatically. The way you pay a bill you've never actually looked at. I paid it in money and in access and in the deliberate suspension of the professional instincts that would have told me years earlier what was actually happening. The fee is canceled now. Some people ask if I'd do anything differently. If there was a version of this where I see the pattern earlier, pull access sooner, trust the numbers instead of the narrative. Probably, yes. But I also think there's a thing that happens to people who leave, who build something new and then spend years being quietly punished for it by the people who stayed. You start to confuse guilt with responsibility. You pay and you give and you absorb because it feels like the only way to keep the peace, and eventually you forget that peace you're buying isn't real. It's a performance. The invoice just keeps coming. The difference between me and a lot of people in that situation is that I had a very specific set of tools when the invoice finally crossed a line. Not everyone has those tools, but everyone has the ability to read the pattern when it's in front of them. The numbers always tell the truth. The question is whether you're willing to look at them. I looked. And now Maya has 3 windows in her bedroom, and she doesn't need anyone to apologize for being the kid whose mom built something worth stealing. That's enough. That's more than enough. There's a thing that happens when someone you love betrays you in a calculated way. Not a hot-tempered, regretted, immediately way, a planned way. A 4 days of texting, wait for the right night, make sure she's asleep way. The grief doesn't arrive how you expect. It doesn't crash in. It seeps. It rewrites. You go back through years of memories and you watch them change color, one by one, like photographs left in sunlight. I've done a lot of that in the months since this happened. Sitting with a cup of coffee going cold, turning moments over in my hands. The birthday jig cried because I couldn't fly home, and now I wonder what she actually needed from that. The holidays, I wired money for last-minute expenses, and she was grateful in a way that felt warm but looking back had the texture of relief. A plan staying on track. I don't say this to be cruel about her. I say it because I think the hardest part of being deceived by someone close to you isn't the anger. It's the audit, the involuntary, exhausting audit of everything you thought was real. What I keep coming back to is this. The consequences Jade is facing right now are not something I did to her. They are the precise and inevitable shape of what she chose to do. She made a decision, a considered, multi-day, co-conspired decision. And that decision had a structure to it. Actions have structures, they have weight and direction, and they travel forward in time and they land. What landed on Jade landed because of the trajectory she set, not because I reacted to it. I think about Maya asking me, completely matter of factly, is it fixable? 8 years old, 3 in the morning, and her first instinct was not panic. It was problem solving. I didn't teach her that directly. I think she absorbed it from watching me work. From watching me sit with hard numbers and not flinch. From watching me treat a difficult situation as a thing to be understood rather than a thing to be survived. That's what I want her to carry forward. Not toughness for its own sake. Toughness without judgment is just rigidity. What I want for her is the particular combination of honesty and skill and willingness to look clearly at what's actually in front of you, even when what's in front of you is someone you love behaving in a way that costs you something. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. Those two things are not opposites. I loved the version of Jade I believed in for 30 years. I also filed the SAR. Both are true. Both were necessary. The negligence I'm most honest with myself about is the part where I let it go on because engaging with the reality felt harder than paying the fee. That's on me, not the theft. She made that choice, but the decade of willful not looking. I was trained to read financial patterns, and I chose not to read the one in my own life because reading it meant losing something I wanted to keep. The idea of a sister who was difficult but fundamentally on my side, intelligence without the courage to apply it to the things that are personally costly, isn't really intelligence. It's just competence in safe conditions. I'm still working on that. I think I will be for a while. But Maya has 3 windows in her bedroom now, and every morning I watch the light come through all 3 of them, and I think, this is what clear-eyed choices look like when they compound forward. Not perfectly, not without loss, but forward. That's enough. That really is enough.